So most of the 10th edition datasheets aren't generally out yet, but that's not going to stop Warhammer fans from releasing some anyway. Let's talk through a few dodgy datasheets that have been circling the internet and how much merit they might have. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking 10th edition things once more, and over the last few days and weeks there have been some more 10th edition datasheets circulating on the internet. I've been sent them really quite a lot, so I thought we'd take a look at some of the most popular offerings from the internet and see how they shape up in terms of credibility to Games Workshop's offerings. We definitely do get Warhammer datasheet leaks every so often, but I'm a bit skeptical of these, though it's not impossible that they could have some merit. The ones that we're going to talk about today are a few datasheets that have been sent a few times by multiple people. They've been cropping up over the internet, and it does seem from the amount of people sending them in that they are convincing some people, though I would argue that there's serious reasons to doubt all of them. The first one's very obvious, but the rest two perhaps less so. My guess would be for the 10th edition index datasheets is they're a little bit less likely to escape Games Workshop's confinement early compared with some. We will be getting some physical data cards, but the main offering initially is going to be digital indexes, and I feel like the digital datasheets are kind of unlikely to escape, at least perhaps a little bit less so than codexes that are shipped around the world. I also feel that maybe we'd be a little bit more likely to get a mass leak rather than single individual datasheets coming forward. Though to be fair, Games Workshop being Games Workshop, they seem to find new and creative ways to leak each thing that's coming out in one way or another, and it does usually make having a serious look at these a little bit interesting. Today I thought we'd just take a look at 3 different levels of datasheets that I think are fake, starting with a super obvious one, and then moving on to a couple that are far more convincing. First up, this is perhaps the one that have been sent the most, the supposed datasheet for Primaris Intercessors, which I would argue is the least convincing of the lot, even from a quick look over it. If we believe this one, then we'd have some slightly altered profiles on the various different bolt rifles, plus things like transhuman physiology and gene-wrought mites being inherent abilities on the datasheet, giving you some strength and toughness boosts. To be honest though, the formatting of this one is really off if you compare it to the actual datasheets that Games Workshop have come out with so far. If, say, you take a look at the Tyrannid Termagant one that they came up with originally, this one just looks far more polished and has a whole load of formatting things that the other datasheet doesn't have. And so do the Terminators to an even greater extent, as these ones were Space Marine datasheets that I think came out sometime after the Fate Intercessor datasheet was released, so you can see a lot more differences as to how actual Adeptus Astartes datasheets appear to be set up in this edition. To be honest, the formatting differences on this one are so many that it's almost not really worth pointing them out. It's basically 100% confirmed fake already, as Games Workshop have given us the leadership characteristic. That was 6 rather than 7. Plus the Terminator datasheet doesn't have a sergeant on, there's no faction abilities, and all sorts of formatting like the edges of the datasheet are just completely off. It certainly felt like a low effort one, though it still seems to have convinced a whole bunch of people, as I've had lots and lots of people send me this in saying that this one has leaked. I think we can be about as safe as possible that this one definitely is fake. Then though, and perhaps a bit more interestingly, we have this one for Plague Marines, and for this one the formatting of it just seems a lot more consistent with the Tyrannid and the Terminator datasheets. Compared with the Intercessor one, we've got the little faction icon that's in between the Death Guard faction keyword and the regular keywords that the unit gets. The little banner behind the Plague Marine pictures is a lot more consistent with the other ones, plus it's got that kind of jazzy background that they have, with some vague artwork of I think models zoomed in on really close to have a backdrop for the unit that's a bit more of a texture than just a flat colour. For this one, we've also got faction abilities separated out from the unit abilities. The one that this datasheet is coming out with is the Trench Fighters one, and this one's deciding that it'll give them a 3 attack profile if they've got Plague Knives. Then we've got an absolutely massive weapon roster here, loads of different options on the Plague Marine units. And interestingly, on the melee weapon section here, we've got Plague Weapon versus Great Plague Weapon as 2 different melee options. I certainly could imagine a way where Games Workshop might group the various different plague attacks into one big profile. They do seem to be trying to get away from every single squad member having a different profile to roll in combat, which is the case for Plague Marines at the moment. Their datasheet is a bit of a nightmare as far as 9th edition goes. Again though, while this one is made a lot more cleverly and with a lot more effort than the previous one, there still are a few bugs that kind of show it is a fake one. Perhaps one of the most obvious ones is that the bolt gun is just listed as a rapid fire weapon. As per one of the most recent previews, that would now be rapid fire 1 or rapid fire 2 or something, probably most likely rapid fire 1 in the bolt gun's case, so this will be a lot more in keeping with the old system than the current one. The background image as well behind the Death Guard Plague Marines I believe is the background for the Tyranid slide as well. It matches up exactly with the background for the Tyranid Termagants, rather than having a new one per faction, which is what we've seen with the Space Marines I suppose. I'd also say that the formatting for the keywords on the bottom left is just a little bit off as well. They're not in bold, they're just in regular text. So again, another small formatting error there. To be honest, I would have considered most of the profiles at least relatively convincing on this. Nothing really that looks too enormously crazy. Finally though, and perhaps the most interestingly of all, is this datasheet for the avatar of Khaine. And this one's kind of interesting as it's both more ambitious and more convincing than the Death Guard one in my opinion. There are a couple of things that really seem to let it down with a few grammar errors. There's a whole bunch of stats that do seem kind of plausible from what we know of 10th edition. A toughness of 10 definitely isn't out of the question, given that Games Workshop said the toughest things would have 12 or more. The Wailing Doom characteristics do seem kind of believable as well. One has a beam characteristic, and the Wailing Doom Piercing Strike gets an anti-demon weapon rule, which will be kind of cool I suppose. And otherwise a few of the stats are at least fairly comparable to what we have now. I think perhaps the single most interesting part of this one is the degrading part of the datasheet, which says it's degrading rating of 1 with characteristics for attacks, leadership and OC. And that's something that we're currently still awaiting from Games Workshop to confirm one way or the other what sort of format a degrading monster will be in. They did say that it will be listed on a single line and the characteristics would fall based on that. And it's kind of interesting whether or not this formatting will turn out to be the correct one from Games Workshop, or if it's someone who's just completely making it up on the fly. Just seems like it'd be a bit weird if you were going to the trouble of faking a datasheet to fake a bit that's quite rapidly going to be confirmed one way or the other. I feel like Games Workshop's going to showcase a vehicle or monster in the not too distant future. Otherwise, in terms of credibility, the background on the top banner with the photo is different again this time, so that has it as a win over the Plague Marines I think. Kind of interesting that this one's a photo image rather than a digital image. Not sure whether it's supposed to be representing a data card or a picture of a screen there. And to be honest, most of the rules, claims and keywords look kind of plausible, bar a few things that just seem a bit unlikely. The thing that seems to let this one down are just a few really quite basic grammar errors. For example, in its abilities, for its command ability to lead models nearby, it says you can use this model leadership as opposed to this model's leadership. And perhaps even more so in the following ability, it says that you can use the fight on dead stratagem for 0 CP, where you'd almost certainly expect it to be fight on death. Just seems kind of funny that you go to this level of effort faking a datasheet like this, and then the thing that would be a trip up would be the grammar. I guess it could possibly be made by someone for whom English isn't their first language. Another thing that maybe looks a little bit sus is the epic character keyword down on the bottom left. Games Workshop have referred their characters as epic heroes so far. If you did have a model that can't be taken more than once in an army, and even then I'm not 100% sure it's going to be appearing in this keyword section to be honest, much in the same way as we don't have battle line on the Termagants. Still though, not saying that's entirely out of the possibility. I guess you might have character or epic character keywords to actually more focus on the rules, and epic hero might be the way that you can take things within an army list for example. Overall though, despite getting the vast majority of things right as best I can tell, I still guess that this is most likely going to be a fake, given those grammar errors, but again it's not entirely impossible with Games Workshop's quality control that things might have slipped through. I feel like whether this is real or fake, perhaps the most interesting thing is the degrading profile section. It'll be interesting to see whether this one is on the money with that, or whether that is a complete fabrication and Games Workshop's going to record it in another way. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed having a look through a few dodgy datasheets from the internet. Let me know what you make of them down in the comments below. And feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics for more 10th edition things. I'll certainly be trying to cover Games Workshop's news and updates as we go along. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, if you would like to help support and keep these videos coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.